My name is Elena Whitmore, and I am 34 years old. Up until last Thursday, I believed grief was the heaviest thing a person could carry. I was wrong. The text came at 6:12 in the morning. Not a phone call. Not a conversation. Just a message from my aunt. Don't come. It's better if you stay away. At first, I thought she meant emotionally. Then the second message arrived. You are not welcome at the funeral. The family has decided. The family. My grandmother had died 3 days earlier. Margaret Whitmore, the only person in that house who ever looked at me and saw something other than inconvenience. I hadn't even processed her absence yet. And now I was being erased from her farewell. The funeral was scheduled at St. Bartholomew's, the old stone church where she had sung in the choir for 30 years. I could picture the worn wooden pews, the smell of polished oak, the quiet dignity of the place. And I was not allowed to enter. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that 2 weeks before she died, my grandmother had already filed something. And it had nothing to do with flowers. I didn't reply to the texts. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I got dressed the way I always do when I need to feel steady. Simple black coat, hair pinned back, no jewelry except the thin silver ring my grandmother gave me when I finished university. The one she said reminded her that I belonged to myself, not to anyone's opinion. Outside, the city was gray and damp, the kind of morning where every sound feels quieter than it should. My hands didn't shake until I turned the key in my car. Then the anger hit, hot and sudden, followed by something colder. Memory. Because this wasn't new. It was just the loudest version of a familiar pattern. My Aunt Clarissa had always been the family's gatekeeper. She controlled invitations, controlled conversations, controlled the story everyone told about everyone else. And in her version of the story, I was the difficult one. The niece who moved away. The one who didn't show up for Christmas dinners where the air tasted like judgment and the compliments had sharp edges. My father used to say, "Don't make waves, Elena. Just keep your head down." My grandmother used to whisper, "Let them talk. You keep your spine." I drove to St. Bartholomew's anyway, not because I thought they would welcome me, because grief doesn't ask permission, and because my grandmother had taught me something they never understood. Silence isn't weakness. It's control. The church parking lot was already half full when I arrived. Black coats. Polished shoes. Familiar faces standing in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones that carried just enough to be overheard. When I stepped out of my car, the conversations didn't stop. They slowed. That was always the first signal. My cousin Daniel noticed me first. His expression shifted from surprise to discomfort in a single breath. He glanced toward the church entrance, then back at me like I was a problem he didn't want assigned to him. "Elena," he said carefully, walking over. You shouldn't be here." "I know what the text said," I replied. His jaw tightened. "It's not my decision. Aunt Clarissa thinks it would cause tension. Today's not the day for conflict." Conflict. As if I were a thunderstorm rolling in. Through the open church doors, I could see the front pew. My grandmother's white casket rested beneath the stained glass window she loved most, the one with the blue lilies. She used to sit under that window and squeeze my hand during long sermons. My chest tightened. "I'm not here for conflict," I said quietly. "I'm here for her." Daniel hesitated. For a second, I thought he might step aside. But then Clarissa herself appeared at the entrance. Perfect black suit. Pearls. Controlled grief painted carefully across her face. She didn't walk toward me. She walked with purpose. "Elena," she said, her voice smooth but sharp underneath. "You were told not to come." And in that moment, in front of relatives, neighbors, the church elders, she blocked the doorway. As if I were a stranger trying to enter. As if I didn't belong. But what she didn't know was that my grandmother had already made sure I did. For a moment, we just stood there. Clarissa positioned perfectly in the doorway, framed by stained glass and soft organ music drifting from inside. If someone had taken a photograph, it would have looked like a grieving daughter protecting sacred space. But I knew her. "This is not appropriate," she continued, lowering her voice so only I could hear. Grandmother was very clear about wanting peace today. You've always had a talent for disruption. There it was. The rewriting of history. I spoke to her last week, I said calmly. Clarissa's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. That's impossible, she replied quickly. She was heavily medicated. She barely recognized anyone. That's not true. Her smile thinned. You haven't been around, Elena. You don't understand the situation. We took care of her. We handled everything. The arrangements. The paperwork. The estate. The estate. The word hung between us. Behind her, the organ stopped playing. The service was about to begin. You should leave, she said. This isn't your place. And that was the moment I realized something. She wasn't protecting the funeral. She was protecting control. Because 2 weeks ago, when I sat beside my grandmother in her small hospital room, the one overlooking the river, she wasn't confused. She wasn't medicated beyond awareness. She was lucid, clear, and deliberate. And she had asked me one very specific question. Do you still have the lawyer's number I gave you? I looked at Clarissa standing in that doorway, confident and unshaken. She thought she had handled the paperwork. She thought she had arranged everything. She had no idea something had already been filed. And it wasn't by her. 2 weeks before she passed, I sat beside my grandmother's hospital bed while the late afternoon sun turned the river outside her window silver. She wasn't weak. She wasn't confused. She was watching. Your aunt thinks I don't understand what's happening, she said quietly, her voice steady despite the oxygen line beneath her nose. They've been discussing my house, as if I've already left it. I didn't respond. I had heard the whispers too. The renovations they planned. The practical decisions about selling quickly. The way Clarissa referred to it as when it's ours. Grandma turned her head toward me. Her eyes were sharp. I built that house with your grandfather, she said. Every beam, every tile. I will not have it treated like an inheritance lottery. Then she reached into the drawer beside her bed and handed me a small envelope. I've updated everything, she said. And I've already filed it. Filed. I remember the weight of that word. The finality. I don't want a scene, she continued. But I also don't want my voice rewritten after I'm gone. She made me promise something that day. Let them believe whatever they want until the right moment, she said. And then let the truth speak. Back in the present, standing outside the church doors, I realized something else. Clarissa wasn't just blocking me from a funeral. She was trying to prevent variables. She didn't want unpredictability. She didn't want witnesses. She didn't want any interruption before the reading of the will tomorrow morning. Because she believed she had already secured everything. And that belief was about to cost her. The church doors opened wider behind Clarissa as the first hymn began. People were taking their seats. Time was moving. This is your last chance to leave quietly, she said, her voice now edged with impatience. We are not doing this here. I studied her face. Perfect posture. Controlled breath. A woman who had rehearsed authority her entire life. You're right, I said softly. Relief flickered across her expression. This isn't the place. And then I stepped back. Gasps rippled behind her, not because I pushed through, but because I didn't. I turned away from the doorway. I walked back down the stone steps. Slowly. Calmly. Not defeated. Strategic. Because my grandmother had taught me something else in that hospital room. Never argue in a room where they think they're winning, she had said. Let them finish the performance. So I let them. I sat in my car and watched as the church doors closed. Through the stained glass, I could see movement. Shadows shifting. A ceremony beginning. They thought they had removed the complication. They thought they had preserved control. They didn't know that the real stage was in the church. It was the lawyer's office the next morning. And unlike funerals, legal documents don't care who is invited. They only care who is named. The reading of the will was scheduled for 10 o'clock sharp the next morning at Whitmore and Hale, the same firm my grandfather had used for 40 years. Clarissa arrived first. Of course she did. Black tailored coat, dark glasses, a folder tucked neatly under her arm like she was attending a board meeting, not a reckoning. My father sat beside her, stiff and silent. Daniel avoided eye contact. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper, the kind of place where decisions become permanent. When I walked in, conversation stopped. Clarissa didn't hide her irritation this time. "I'm surprised you came," she said evenly. "I'm named," I replied. The lawyer, Mr. Hale, cleared his throat gently.
"Yes."
"You are." That was the first crack. Clarissa's fingers tightened around her folder. "We already discussed the general outline," she said quickly. "Mother wanted things simple. Equal distribution." Mr. Hale adjusted his glasses. "I'm afraid that's not accurate." The silence shifted. Paper slid across the table. Margaret Whitmore filed a revised and notarized will 14 days before her passing, he continued. The previous document was voided. Clarissa's face turned pale. It hardened. "That's impossible," she said. "No," Mr. Hale replied calmly. "It's legally binding." And then he began to read. "I, Margaret Evelyn Whitmore, being of sound mind." Mr. Hale's voice was steady, deliberate, the kind of voice that doesn't rush truth. Clarissa sat unnaturally still. My father leaned forward slightly. Daniel looked between all of us like he'd just realized he'd missed a chapter. The preliminary bequests were ordinary. Small charitable donations. Specific gifts to old friends. Church contributions. Clarissa visibly relaxed. Then Mr. Hale turned the page. "As to my primary residence at 14 Willow Crescent, including all furnishings, personal effects, and associated land." That was the house. The house Clarissa had already told people she would renovate. The house she had referred to, more than once, as ours. Mr. Hale paused just long enough to make sure every word landed. "I leave said property in its entirety to my granddaughter, Elena Whitmore."
The air changed.
It didn't explode. It compressed. Clarissa blinked once.
"Twice."
"That's not correct," she said flatly. Mr. Hale didn't look at her. "It is." My father inhaled sharply. Daniel whispered something under his breath. Clarissa's composure cracked, just slightly.
"She was medicated," she said.
She wasn't in her right mind. This must have been influence. Mr. Hale folded his hands. The will was signed in the presence of 2 independent witnesses and a licensed medical professional who certified her cognitive clarity.
"Filed."
Not promised. Not drafted.
"Filed."
My grandmother hadn't left room for doubt. She had left documentation. And we weren't done yet. Clarissa's chair scraped sharply against the hardwood floor as she stood. "This is manipulation," she snapped. She was vulnerable. Elena was always persuasive. I didn't respond. Mr. Hale continued reading. "In addition, I direct that the Whitmore residence shall not be sold for a minimum period of 10 years. It is my expressed wish that the property remain intact and preserved." Clarissa's expression shifted from outrage to calculation. 10 years. No sale.
"No liquidation. No renovation contracts."
No quick payout. The house wasn't just inherited. It was protected. And then came the final clause. "I further state that any challenge to this will shall result in the immediate forfeiture of that individual's inheritance, which shall instead be donated to the Margaret Whitmore Community Scholarship Fund." Silence. Not stunned silence. Strategic silence. Clarissa understood exactly what that meant. If she contested it and lost, she would walk away with nothing.
"No fallback."
No partial share. Everything redirected. My grandmother had anticipated the reaction. She had structured the defense. Daniel looked pale. My father stared at the table as if it might rearrange itself into a different reality. Clarissa finally turned to me. "You planned this?" "No," I said evenly. She did. And for the first time in my life, Clarissa had no script, no performance, no doorway to block, only documentation. Clarissa didn't sit back down immediately. She stood there, hands braced against the table, breathing carefully, the way someone does when they're deciding whether to explode or retreat. "You think this is a victory?" she said quietly. I looked at her, really looked at her. For years, she had controlled rooms with posture and tone. She had curated narratives like furniture, arranging people where they were most useful. This isn't a victory, I replied. It's a boundary. Mr. Hale closed the folder. The will is enforceable, he said. The property transfer process will begin immediately. Ms. Whitmore will schedule the title documentation this week. Ms. Whitmore. Not niece. Not difficult child. Not complication. Owner. Clarissa finally sat down. The fight drained from her face, replaced by something unfamiliar. Realization. The house she had mentally redecorated was never hers. The sale she had planned at the funeral reception was never happening. The control she tried to preserve by locking me out of a church had already been removed from her hands. I stood. I won't be contesting anything, I said calmly. And I won't be selling.
My father looked up for the first time.
What are you going to do with it? He asked. I thought of the blue lily window, the creaking stairs, the study where my grandmother kept letters tied with ribbon. I'm keeping it, I said. The way she asked. No drama. No raised voice. No revenge speech. Just execution. As I walked out of that office, I realized something quiet and undeniable. They kicked me out of her funeral, but they couldn't erase me from her legacy. And sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't forcing your way through the door. It's owning the house behind it.